A North Korean delegation is touring the Olympic host city of PyeongChang to make sure it's okay for the country's skiers. And they've just met, but it's time to get down to business. The unified women's ice hockey team will begin training together exactly 2 weeks before the games kick off. South Korea logs a protest after Japan opens a government-sponsored exhibition in Tokyo, claiming sovereignty over Korea's Dokdo Island. It further inflames tensions, even as Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe prepares to travel here for the Winter Olympics. Plus, the tariff dispute is heating up. South Korea notifies the World Trade Organization of its request for talks with the US over the Trump administration's newly introduced safeguard measures on washing machines and solar panels. So, let's start with the second day for North Korea's Olympics inspection team here in South Korea. Today, they will tour venues for cross-country skiers and alpine skiing in the host city of PyeongChang. Our Lee Myung-bak starts us off.
After spending their first day of a 3-day visit in South Korea inspecting facilities in Gangneung, the 8-member North Korean delegation is in PyeongChang on Friday, where they will take a look around ski venues. In the morning, they will visit the International Broadcast Center and the accommodation facility. In the afternoon, they will visit the PyeongChang Olympic Stadium, where the opening and closing ceremonies of the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics will take place. They will also look around the Alpensia ski resort, where cross-country skiing will take place. 3 North Korean athletes have been selected to compete in this category. The inspection team will also check out the Yongpyeong Alpine Center located in the PyeongChang Mountain Cluster, as 3 North Korean athletes will compete in alpine skiing. A total of 22 North Korean athletes will compete in 5 disciplines, making this the largest North Korean delegation in Winter Olympic history. On Saturday, the inspection team plans to check out accommodation facilities in Seoul for the 30-member taekwondo demonstration team that Pyongyang agreed to send for the games, as well as the concert hall of a local broadcasting station. They will head back to North Korea in the afternoon. With the North Korean women's ice hockey team already in the south, other North Korean athletes are expected to arrive in South Korea on February the 1st, while the art troupe will arrive on February 6th. Cheerleaders, members of the taekwondo demonstration team, and journalists are scheduled to arrive on February 7th. Lee Myung-bak, Arirang News.
The US State Department has reiterated that it supports inter-Korean talks on the Winter Olympics, but says it doesn't believe it's the right time to hold negotiations on North Korea's nuclear weapons program. With South and North Korea having held several rounds of talks this year in regards to the North's participation at the PyeongChang Olympics, State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert told reporters Thursday that the US certainly supports such contacts and conversations, but it's up to North Korea to lead negotiations on the North's denuclearization. She added that the US is looking forward to having a terrific Olympics in Korea. And the United States has confirmed that the South Korea-US joint military drills will be held immediately after the PyeongChang Winter Olympics are over. According to Bloomberg, US Joint Chiefs of Staff Director Kenneth McKenzie told reporters that Seoul and Washington will avoid conflict during the Olympics, but will hold drills right after the Games wrap up. South Korea's Defense Ministry has said the drills will be held as normal after the Olympics, but has not elaborated on the exact schedule. So it all begins today as one team, women ice hockey players from South and North Korea, will attempt to sync their games as they prepare for the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. The unified team only has one practice match, that's against Sweden on February 4th, to play together before the real deal starts a few days later. Our Chung Hyeon with the details.
The North Korean women's ice hockey players arrived in South Korea on Thursday. 12 hockey players along with 3 staff members will form a combined team with their southern counterparts for the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. After crossing the border on Thursday morning, the team, wearing the colors of the North Korean flag, headed to the National Training Center in Jincheon, 90 kilometers south of Seoul. The coach of the North Korean team expressed his feelings toward forming the only combined South-North team at the PyeongChang Olympics.
I am very pleased to participate at the Olympics as the only unified team formed between North and South. If we work together with unified strength in mind, I think we will achieve good results at the Games.
The hockey team have their first training session next week under Sarah Murray, the head coach of the unified team, and will play Sweden in a friendly match 5 days before the start of the Olympics. Their first group stage match is against Switzerland on February 10th. Another 10 North Korean athletes, including a figure skating pair, and several speed skaters and skiers will also compete at PyeongChang. But North Korea's participation has proved controversial among South Koreans. Some welcomed the North's participation, but others complained that the unified women's ice hockey team was unfair to the South Korean athletes, depriving them of a chance to compete at the Games. And there are concerns that the sudden addition of so many players so close to the competition could also disrupt team chemistry and impact on results. Jong, Arirang News.
Now, it looks like the joint inter-Korean cultural performance celebrating the PyeongChang Winter Olympics will be held early next month at Mount Kumgang. Upon the return of the first South Korean delegation from North Korea after looking around sites for performance venues, the Director General at Seoul's Unification Ministry said the two Koreas will consult with one another as there's not really much time left. 12 South Korean inspectors were in North Korea for 3 days to tour facilities at Mount Kumgang, the Ma Sikryong ski resort and Galma Airport, a military airfield, to see whether it's fit to fly in South Korean athletes for training. Further details, including the exact schedule of the Mount Kumgang performance, will be announced by Seoul's Unification Ministry in the coming hours. Now, in other non-Olympic related news, Japan continues to provoke Korea with its claims to Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo with the establishment of an exhibition hall in Tokyo. The South Korean government has strongly protested the move, reminding Japan that facts should serve as the foundation for Korea-Japan relations. Lee Myung-bak with more.
South Korea-Japan relations continue to sour as Seoul's foreign ministry has strongly protested Japan's establishment of an exhibition hall in central Tokyo that was set up to promote Japan's claims to Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo. The ministry issued the protest on Thursday, once again reminding Japan that Dokdo is Korean territory and that the exhibition hall must immediately be closed.
Our government strongly protests the Japanese government's opening of the Territorial Sovereignty Exhibit Hall in Tokyo to make unjustifiable claims to Dokdo, which is Korea's inherent territory. We demand it be closed immediately.
In addition, the foreign ministry called in Katsuro Kitagawa, the Minister for Political Affairs at the Japanese Embassy to South Korea, with the Seoul government also lodging their protest with Japan's foreign ministry. Earlier this week, Japan's Foreign Minister Taro Kono stated in a parliamentary speech that Dokdo is part of Japan's territory and that he will continue to make efforts to strengthen the case for Japanese ownership in the future. The latest controversy comes a day after Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe expressed his willingness to attend the opening ceremony of the PyeongChang Winter Olympics in South Korea, raising optimism over the recent soured relations between the two nations. Dokdo, called Takashima in Japan, has long been a source of tension between the neighbors, as questions remain whether this latest dispute will further impact the foreign relations of the two nations. Lee Myung-bak, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has notified the World Trade Organization of a request for consultations with the US over the Trump administration's new safeguard measures. This follows President Trump's approval of measures that will undermine Korean washing machine manufacturers. Park Jong reports.
The World Trade Organization has been put on notice, and the South Korean government now plans to call on the U.S. to ease and roll back its safeguard measures. Seoul's trade ministry said Thursday it has notified the WTO that it had asked the U.S. for consultations over its imposition of a protective trade measure on imported residential washers. In a document posted on the WTO's website, Seoul made the request as it considers the safeguard measure to be, quote, inconsistent with U.S. obligations under the relevant provisions of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade 1994 and the Agreement on Safeguards. This request for talks is not aimed at filing a complaint against the U.S. based on the dispute settlement process of the WTO. Rather, it is based on Article 12.3 of the WTO Safeguard Agreement that allows for enough discussions prior to the importer implementing the measure. Earlier, Reuters reported that Seoul had filed a complaint with the WTO against the U.S., but the government was quick to explain that the Reuters report was unfounded. On Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump signed a set of safeguard measures against imported large residential washing machines and solar cells, including those from South Korea, under which import tariffs would be gradually increased. In response, Seoul's trade ministry said it had proposed a bilateral meeting with the U.S. trade representative as early as next week. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
And while we're talking about trade, South Korea and the US will hold a second round of talks next week to revise their free trade agreement. Seoul's trade ministry said on Friday the two countries will hold talks in Seoul for 2 days starting next Wednesday. They will be led by South Korea's negotiator Lee Myung-bak and her US counterpart Michael Beeman, both of whom led the first round of talks in Washington on January 5th. South Korea is expected to raise issues such as regarding the surging US import restrictions, such as the safeguard measures we just heard about, while the US is likely to push for improving its auto exports and lifting of trade barriers. South Korea was the third largest electronics manufacturer and the fifth largest consumer of those goods last year. The Korea Electronics Association also says Korea's production scale of electronics items was $121.7 billion last year, up 10.3% from 2016, and that accounts for 6.8% of the global total to place South Korea in third. South Korea edged out Japan by around $5 billion. Number one on the list, unsurprisingly, was China with 38.1% of the global market share, followed by the US with 13%. Whirlpool, which had petitioned the recent safeguard measures by the US, was the biggest manufacturer of electronics parts and products in North America. Back here in Korea, and briefings by government institutions were held at the Prime Minister's office on Thursday under the theme of establishing a fair and just society. Discussions focused on specific measures to deliver on one of the Moon Jae-in administration's major pledges, namely rooting out corruption. Lee Chung-hyeon reports.
South Korea's Prime Minister has outlined the government's vision to stamp out corruption and establish a fair and just society.
The vision of the Moon Jae-in administration to create a just country is not unrelated to the recent bitter incident of power being abused for personal gain. There have actually been many cases of injustice being carried out and hidden in our society. That is why we are here today.
The Prime Minister's office received briefings on the subject from 7 government institutions on Wednesday, including the Ministry of Justice, Fair Trade Commission, and Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission. The Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission said that one of its goals for 2018 is for Korea to break into the world's top 40 on Transparency International's annual Corruption Perceptions Index. Korea ranked 52nd out of 176 countries in 2016. In the meeting of the Anti-Corruption Policy Consultation Council last September, the Commission said its goal was to be in the top 20 by the year 2022. The Anti-Graft Act that caps the budget for meals and monetary gifts was one of the first steps toward this goal. The Commission also said that it would act as a control tower to combat corruption and enhance transparency, and outlined its 5-year plan from 2018 to 2022. The plan largely aims to raise public awareness of corruption. This includes the nationwide movement for transparency, which starts this spring, aimed at establishing regional agreements for a transparent society. The Commission will also initiate a 365-day safety perception project to analyze reports of public safety violations and civil complaints in the fields of transport, construction, firefighting, and food, to make safety a more prominent aspect of Korean society. Lee Jong-hyun, Arirang News.
Now, digging deeper into the web of shadowy bribery allegations, prosecutors are set to question Lee Sang-duk, the brother of ex-President Lee Myung-bak, over allegations he took illicit funds from the country's intelligence agency. The 83-year-old former lawmaker was initially scheduled to appear before prosecutors early this week, but the date was postponed upon his request, citing lack of preparation and health issues. Prosecutors believe the National Intelligence Service handed millions of dollars of its special activity funds to Lee since early 2011, when he was a sitting lawmaker for the then ruling political party and when Lee Myung-bak was president. In another but not completely separate case, the former president's nephew, Lee Dong-hyung, was also questioned by prosecutors this week over his suspected involvement in the alleged creation of the ex-president's slush fund. Now, having brushed aside some of the biggest names in the sport already, Korea's up-and-coming tennis star Chung Hyeon faces the biggest moment of his young life today, an Australian Open semi-final against the man widely considered to be the greatest player in history, Roger Federer. The 21-year-old Korean is ranked 58th in the world and Federer is currently world number 2. Federer has a staggering 19 Grand Slam titles under his belt, including 5 Australian Open titles. The match comes as Korea is in the grips of the Chung Hyeon fever, with the nation seeing a huge jump in sales of tennis-related goods. Now, the semi-final will start at 5:30 p.m. Korea time on Friday. The winner will play Croatian Marin Cilic in Sunday's final. Now, for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and one place to start today, and that is namely US President Donald Trump's debut at Davos. He arrived in Switzerland on Thursday, a day ahead of his highly anticipated speech at the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So Adam, President Trump tweeted before he left for Davos that he was going to tell the world how great America is. Do we expect this to be well received?
Well, Mark, if he does promote his America First initiative, it may not go down well with the globalist pro-free trade vibes of the annual gathering. Some world leaders have already expressed concerns over Trump's nationalist policies and have criticized his eagerness to cut trade ties with several countries, including South Korea. He has already pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and has also threatened to abandon the North American Free Trade Agreement between the USA, Canada and Mexico. But Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told a gathering at Davos that his country will continue to persuade the US to not pull out of NAFTA.
We're working very hard to make sure that our neighbor to the south recognizes how good NAFTA is and that it has benefited not just our economy, but his economy and the world's economy. But we're also very much open to more trade deals involving more people, as long as it's in the best benefit of all of our citizens.
In a keynote speech, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also said the recent wave of protectionism was worrisome.
It is necessary that the big powers of the world have cooperative relations amongst them. It is necessary that the sense of competitiveness among the major nations of the world does not become a wall between them.
Similar sentiment was also expressed by other leaders, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Overall, there is a sense that Trump is not welcome to this year's World Economic Forum due to his negative tone towards global trade and even climate change. Trump's alleged derogatory remarks towards African nations have also led to many leaders in the continent refusing to meet with him. Beneath the criticism, though, a faint chorus of appreciation can be heard from the business elite, as Trump's economic policies, including corporate tax cuts, have helped fatten their pockets. In other news, at least 3 people have been killed in northern Italy after a commuter train derailed near Milan on Thursday. Around 10 people are also said to have been seriously injured as the Trenord train went off the tracks near Piotello Limito station during morning rush hour. Rescue teams worked for hours to pull people out of the wrecked carriages. The exact cause of the accident is not yet clear, but a collapsed rail track is under investigation. Survivors said the train was shaking heavily before it derailed. A total of 169 Russian athletes have been cleared to compete as neutrals at next month's PyeongChang Winter Olympics. The vice president of the Russian Olympic Committee, however, told reporters on Thursday that it was unfortunate that the country's top athletes did not make it onto the list. The roster was published by the ROC shortly after the announcement and was missing notable names like speed skater Victor Ran and biathlete Anton Shipulin. Last month, the International Olympic Committee banned Russia from competing in PyeongChang, citing what it called systematic manipulation of doping at the 2014 Sochi Games. Instead, it has allowed clean athletes to compete as individuals. American magician David Copperfield has been accused of drugging and sexually assaulting a 17-year-old model in 1988. Brittany Lewis came forward with the allegations on Wednesday, just hours after Copperfield expressed support for the #MeToo movement, while warning against rushing to judgment about allegations of sexual misconduct. She claimed that the magician invited her to one of his California shows after judging a modeling contest which she was competing in. Copperfield's statement on Instagram suggests he may have been aware of that Lewis was about to go public with her allegations. He said he had been falsely accused before in the year 2007 and was having to weather another storm.
Good morning. The season's most intense cold wave continues today. Things don't seem to be too different from yesterday. It's just going to be another bone-chilling day today. In fact, a dry weather advisory has been upgraded to a warning now here in Seoul, with humidity levels going down to as low as 25%, so be sure to drink plenty of water. On that note, here are the readings for today's highs. Daily highs here in Seoul will get up to -10 degrees Celsius, but it's going to feel colder than these actual temperatures due to strong winds, and even Busan will see readings in the negative territory all day today. But some good news, starting tomorrow, at least we won't have highs of around -10 degrees Celsius here in Seoul, while lows will remain on the freezing side for the time being. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. While many parts in South Korea will be colder than Montreal or Moscow on this Friday, most cities in North Korea will have even colder temperatures than the South. And as for the rest of Asia, on Thursday morning, Tokyo had the lowest morning lows in 48 years at a low of -4 degrees Celsius as cold air blanketed wide areas of the nation. And you know what? It's going to be as cold as yesterday. Meanwhile, Australia Day got off to a tropical start in Melbourne, and you're likely to have a hot, humid, and stormy long holiday weekend. Heading to North America, those of you in Vancouver will need to keep an umbrella handy. Rain is in the forecast for about a week now. Heading to South America, Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro will have a wet day along with scattered thunderstorms during the day. Taking you to Europe, the Seine River in Paris is expected to rise farther out of its bank through this weekend, despite northeastern France catching a break from heavy rain. Lastly, to Africa, Cairo will have a rainy Friday. And that's the weather update for now.
And that's where we're going to leave our news broadcast for now as well on this Friday morning here in Seoul. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.